Hey everyone, today we're going to go through a quick hinge warm-up. This is something that you can do before your deadlifting day or before you have any lower body pulling stuff. It's also just a good way to practice dissociating kind of hip from back stuff. So if in the past you've deadlifted and you get some back pain or your back is really tight after you deadlift, it probably means we have some room for improvement there. And that's what this little section is going to focus on today. So we're going to start by getting into the 90-90 position. I just want to do a couple of internal rotation eccentrics, help kind of prime our hip position, and then we'll go into more specific hinging work. So in the 90-90, we're going to be focusing on this trail leg. I want you to take that foot and press that foot down into the floor. And as you do that, you're not necessarily going to feel a glute stretch. I wouldn't identify it as that. What you are going to feel though is that capsule working to create that movement. So as we're pushing down into our foot, I want you to slowly turn your pelvis back. Rotate forward, keep pushing that foot down, and then rotate back. Once you've hit your end range of that rotation, just relax and then reset. So forward, press the foot down, you're scooping that foot through the floor, and turn that pelvis back. And each time as you turn, you're trying to get deeper into that end range of motion. A couple things on this position. Keep on going. Let's try and get a few more of these. If your knee doesn't like being in that position as you rotate back, you can elevate. It may mean that you also have to couple that by leaning over onto your side or onto your elbow. From the side here, I'd be over this way. And that's just a great way that you can kind of modify if you have some knee pain. The other thing that we're focusing on is, let's just pretend this yoga block is my pelvis. It is my torso. So as I'm forward, it's facing my front knee. As I push my foot down and turn back, my whole pelvis shifts so that it's no longer facing this direction, but it's facing this direction. And that's the real key, and that's how we're going to better wind up the stretch in that hip, is by rotating that whole pelvis, not just our rib cage. I'm sure you've done more than 5 reps by now, so let's switch sides. Back into the 90-90 position on this side. Start by rotating forward, chest up, low back is neutral, maybe a little bit into extension if that's a better position for you. Press that foot down and rotate back. Slowly relax and rotate forward. Press down, rotate. Excuse me, have the sniffles here. Press that foot down and spin that hip. Again, each time trying to get deeper into that end active range of motion. So you're still moving into a range of motion where you can continue to push that foot down. If I go too far into this position, I got nothing here. I can't push with really any specific intention. I can, push with my ankle, but I'm trying to keep it within the hip. I'm trying to target really specific tissue here. Intentional movement. Awesome. Those are our 5. Let's go ahead and lay back and we're going to work on our hip capsule car. Hip capsule cars are great because it's stimulus for our motor unit where we have the deepest set of mechanoreceptors within the body. It's also a great way that we can practice dissociating pelvis and low back from our hip. So it's a good practice of actual hip space or joint space within the hip. So we're just going to rotate the femur aspect, the femur component of our hip joint. So I'm going to lay down on my back, keeping my knee directly above my hip. I want you to rotate, heel in, and heel out. Now if you want, I'll spin the other way so you can really see the angle of my knee. I think you guys can see that. Yeah. So now, I'm trying to keep my knee directly above my hip this whole time. So I can even press against my hand, or I can use a yoga block to kind of just give me a little bit more feedback. But what we're trying to do is just practice moving just the femur. This is an axis. We're rotating on that axis. Give me 10 reps on each side. I find that taking my right hand and putting it on my right hip also seems to really, really help. We don't want to feel any movement out of the side of our torso, no crunching of the rib cage. No arching of the low back. This is pure hip rotation. 10 reps. Once you've done your 10, switch sides, do 10 on the other side. Now, if you're going through this range of motion and you're finding like, oh, you know, my left foot or my left hip doesn't internally rotate, that would be foot out to the side, it doesn't internally rotate very well. That's also a diagnostic tool for us to say, maybe I need to add in a little bit more internal rotation pails and rails, or maybe I need to spend a little bit more time doing those internal rotation kinetic stretches. Especially if we have a big discrepancy side to side. Let's get those 10 reps in. All right. So once we have our 10, now we're going to go through kind of a little bit more specific hinge work. So for this one, you're actually going to need a chair. I just happen to have one here. Came prepared today. And what we're going to do on the chair is we're going to practice the hinge itself, but without the stress of having our hamstrings lengthen or get tighter, I should say. Get more into their end range would be a better phrase, probably. So keeping everything neutral, I'm just going to push my knees out to the side so they're a little bit wider from this direction, just knees outside my hips. Kind of a wide stance, almost like you do a sumo deadlift, but we're seated. And then from this position, I'm just going to practice hinging forward and hinging back. Now what we don't want to see is us leave our pelvis behind. So if I go to hinge, I'll tighten my shirt up a little bit. If I go to hinge and I get to here, and then all of a sudden I have to crunch, see how the movement is now coming from my spine? Well, when you're hinging, that's not super duper ideal. Not that it's a bad thing. If you have good spine awareness or good mobility in your spine, good segmentation, that is okay. But we don't want to get in a situation where that is our only movement option. Our only potential to move is by moving the spine. So in this position, I want you to take your sits bones and you're trying to tip everything forward. So you're shifting, abs are tight, you're shifting that pelvis forward and hinging with a nice flat back. Find that bottom position as far as you can go and then pull back up. By no means does this have to be a really huge range of motion. What we're looking for is a really specific range of motion. Again, we'll use that yoga block as an example. Let's say this is my pelvis here from the side. As I go to hinge, all I'm doing is tipping it forward, and that angle stays with my whole spine. So my whole spine follows the tip of my pelvis. I'm just shifting that thing forward. And now what that's doing is that is moving, it's similar to that hip capsule car, right? We're shifting our femur relative to our pelvis, but in this case, we're taking our pelvis and moving it relative to a still femur. So this is a closed chain movement, just like a deadlift. Our feet are on the ground. We don't want that to move. We don't want too much movement here, right? These are nice and solid, and we're using, by keeping a neutral spine, we're keeping tension on our legs. The minute we get forward and then lose that tension, it goes into our spine and we end up with a rounded back. So this seated deadlift is a really great way to practice that hinge, practicing pelvis and spine as one big unit. The second thing we're going to do is is just loosen some things up. So we're going to get into kind of this modified hamstring stretch. So we're still seated. I want you to take your knee and extend it slightly. Not totally locked out, slight bend in the knee. And from here, I want you to drive your heel down into the floor. So just push your foot down and hold it for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, slowly relax, 1. Now this time we're going to do a kinetic stretch. So we're going to utilize that really good hinge that we just practiced, right? No back rounding. Right? Using this as our main joint, hip joint. We're going to try and lift our foot up as we lean forward, closing these two points here, closing this angle. Lift up, lean forward, You should feel increased stretch on that hamstring. And then if you feel this go into your back, that just means you've hit your end range. Now I want you to press your heel down and slowly lean back. Lift up, squeezing that hip flexor and quad. Lean forward. Press down. Lean back. Again, nice straight spine that whole time. We're driving and guiding tension into our hip and hamstring here. You're going to give me 5 reps of this one. And then switch legs. Let's start with the palate contraction on our other side. I'll do this one facing the camera so we each get a different vantage point. So this leg is mostly straight, slight bend. Heel down into the floor, hinge forward. Keep the back flat. Now heel down into the floor. Hold for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, slowly relax. 1, 5 kinetic stretches. Lift up, trying to float that heel up off the floor by squeezing your hip flexor. As you lean forward, get comfortable squeezing these 2 points. This is hip flexion. You're here when you go to deadlift. Now press your foot down and lean back. Lift up. Keep lifting as you lean forward. As you're leaning forward, you should get more of that hamstring lengthening. Heel down, lean back, lift up, lean forward, heel down, lean back, 2 more, lift up, lean forward, heel down, lean back. Again, nice tight spine that whole time. Lift up, lean forward, heel down, lean back. Now, one thing that I don't want you to think about is I have to keep my spine neutral all the time. The goal for keeping your spine neutral is to better guide tension, right? So just from the anatomy of our hamstring, if we start to tuck our pelvis rather than extend our pelvis, we're creating slack on that hamstring and asking for help out of our spine, which isn't a bad thing if you have a good spine. If you have a nice healthy spine that moves really well, segmented, you do a lot of strength training for it, that's okay. But we don't want to get into a position where that is, again, our only option. So next up, we're going to practice what that would look like by doing some challenging cat-cow. So we have a good morning, right? As we hinge over, we have hamstring tension. If I put my arms out in front of me, now I'm in a deadlift position. Back is relatively flat. I have vertical shins simply because I'm trying to create hamstring tension. Maybe if I was doing a barbell deadlift, my knees might be slightly bent forward. Just keep in mind, technique is nothing more than good mobility, being able to drive tension into the right areas. So for this one, vertical shins just so we're keeping hamstring tension, and starting with a neutral spine, and we're going to go into cat-cow from this position. So check out my low back right here. I'm going to tuck my pelvis, round my back, and crunch my rib cage down. Yuck. Worst deadlift position ever, maybe. Now I'm going to go back into extension. I'm going to take my low back and extend it. And you'll really quickly feel those hamstrings get a ton of tension. I'm actually going to arch my back this time. And then repeat, tuck, crunch, round, and extend, arch. Flare that rib cage forward. Lift that chest up. One more, tuck, crunch, round. Pull back into that hamstring tension, lift that chest up, hold, and relax. All right, last thing we're gonna do, just a few single leg RDLs. Now this is probably the most challenging variation that we can do, but we've done a ton of dissociation practice. So we now know how to move our whole spine over our hip joints. That's the goal for this. All we're doing is just driving that even further. So we're gonna try and do a nice couple of slow single leg RDLs on a 5-second count into the bottom position. So watch my heel, knee, hip, shoulder stay in a straight line as I hinge over my left leg. 5, keeping my pelvis square to the floor. 4, 3, 2, 1. I find a ton of hamstring tension. I'm slowly pulling back out of it. Give me 2 more on this side. Hinge, Slight bend out of your straight leg. Find a ton of hamstring tension. Keep the abs tight and back up. And last one. Hinge over. Nice neutral spine. Again, this is just practicing dissociation from pelvis and spine to the hip. 3 more on this opposite leg. Slight bend, hinge over. And back up. Last one. And back up. Whew, well done. All right, you are all clear to go do some lower body pulling. That being said, don't forget to do the rest of your CARS routine. This is just a specific mobility practice to the hips and low back for deadlifting, practicing that hinge. So if your problem isn't the hinge, but it's your shoulder blades, make sure you give those guys a nice good warm up before you go do your lower body workout. Good luck, keep it up, and I will see you guys for our next Kinstretch session. See ya.